We're jumping right into this one, the 15 most lopsided trades in baseball history after the intro. Like everything else I've done, gotta lay out the ground rules and methodology. First, the ranking metric is going to be net B-WAR, going to look at how much WAR each player put up on each team after the trade, and whatever the biggest difference is, makes the list. Second, only accounting for years of team control or years under contract at the time of the trade. To highlight what I mean, going to give the example of Mookie Betts in 2020. The Red Sox had 1 year of control of Betts, weren't going to extend him, and decided to trade him to the Dodgers for Alex Verdugo, Jeter Downs, and Connor Wong. The Dodgers immediately extended Betts to a 13-year deal. In acquiring Betts, did the Dodgers get additional value in the trade from being able to negotiate and sign an extension with him exclusively? Absolutely. Did the Red Sox lose additional value when the Dodgers extended Betts? Not at all. In their minds, it was 1 year of Betts for those three players, and in that sense, that's how we're going to look at it too. Is some of the context removed by only looking at years under control? Yes, but it's the best way to be as fair as possible for both teams when looking at every trade. Third, only trades from 1975 to today. Why 1975? Well, that was the first year of free agency in Major League Baseball. If I included trades prior to then, those trades would dominate the list since a player was essentially under team control for life in those days, so trading for a young player that becomes a Hall of Famer, like Babe Ruth, would obliterate any trade post-1975 and would be a pretty boring and predictable list. And finally, only trades that have at least one player going each way. No trades that are just a player for cash, like Babe Ruth. Man, I'm really bailing out the Red Sox on this list. First, some honorable mentions. These are trades that did not make the list, but they're very recent trades, and with how things are going, there's a chance they could be on the list in the future. Note that the cutoff to make the list is 29.4 net B-WAR, so keep that in mind on how close or far away these trades are. First honorable mention, 2017. White Sox received Dylan Cease, Eloy Jimenez, Brian Fleta, and Matt Rose from the Cubs in exchange for Jose Quintana. Fleta and Rose both didn't make the majors with the White Sox and are now in independent ball, and Jose Quintana put up 2.6 WAR for the Cubs in his 4 years with the team, a massive step back from his prime with the White Sox. So that leaves Cease and Jimenez to reach 32 WAR in their team control years to make the list. They're almost halfway there at 14.6 WAR now, which includes a short in 2020, and with 3 years left of team control for Cease and 2 years left for Jimenez, adding another 20 isn't that far-fetched. Cease alone put up 6.4 WAR in 2022 and finished second in the Cy Young. And while Jimenez hasn't had a full breakout season yet, he also hasn't played over 85 games since 2019. It's not out of the question that he puts up 3 or 4 WAR seasons in 2023 and 2024 if he plays at the level he has so far, but just stays healthy. The White Sox also have 2 player options for Jimenez that buy out the first 2 free agent years, but since that extension happened after the trade, 2025 and 2026 for Jimenez won't count towards the list. Honorable mention number 2, 2016. Padres get Fernando Tatis Jr. and Eric Johnson from the White Sox for James Shields. Like the previous trade, all but one player are done, with Shields getting minus 0.3 WAR for the White Sox and Johnson putting up minus 0.4 WAR for the Padres. That leaves Tatis. Tatis did sign a long-term extension with the Padres, but going by the team control rule, he only has 3 more seasons to add to the WAR total for this trade. He's currently at 13.6, and 2022 was an obvious setback, but if in 2023, 2024, and 2025 he puts up similar numbers to his 2021, which was a 6.6 WAR season, that would put this trade squarely in the top 15 most lopsided. Side note, if you want to laugh, go look up the reactions at the time of this trade because Tatis was an unknown, having signed as a mid-level international amateur just a year prior at age 16. I wasn't over the moon about acquiring Shields, but it looks like the White Sox gave up nothing of consequence to get him. Neither are top 30 in the White Sox system. Padres are just dumping Shields money. Goes to show how you just never know how a trade will turn out. Honorable mention number 3, 2021. Cardinals get Nolan Arenado from the Rockies for Austin Gomber, Elehuris Montero, Mateo Gil, Tony Losi, and Jake Summers. For this one, the team control rule benefits the Cardinals heavily. The Rockies already had Arenado locked up for another 7 years prior to the trade, so the Cardinals still have 5 more years of Arenado production added to this trade's total, and he just put up a career year in 2022, posting his highest career OPS plus and has clearly been the top defensive third baseman over the past decade. He's about to turn 32, so a decline could be on the horizon, and the Rockies can still add to their total in the trade with Gomber and Montero currently on the roster and Gill, Losi, and Summers still in the minor leagues, but none of those 5 have even shown average MLB starter type numbers or have been top 100 prospects in the last 3 years, so any major value coming from those guys in the future would be a surprise. But then again, as we saw with Tatis, you never know. Honorable mention number 4, 2016. Astros get Yordan Alvarez from the Dodgers for Josh Fields. This one's kind of weird because the Dodgers had just signed Alvarez on a pretty significant $2 million international amateur signing bonus, which was actually $4 million with penalties due to going over their international bonus pool, while Josh Fields had been a replacement level reliever for the Astros. There's even some speculation that the deal was coordinated before Alvarez was signed so the Astros could get around international amateur spending limits to avoid penalties, but since the Astros still went 15% over their bonus pool, that doesn't really check out. The truth is probably more mundane than that. The Dodgers were looking for bullpen depth, and much like Tatis Jr. in that trade, Alvarez was a 16-year-old that was only the 5th highest international signing bonus that the Dodgers handed out that year. To know why the Dodgers handed out so much in international signing bonuses in 2015 and why that can't happen again, check out my video on international spending rules changing because teams like the Dodgers and Red Sox were abusing the system. Regardless, Alvarez has been one of the best hitters in the league since his call-up in 2019, and put up his best season yet in 2022, finishing 3rd in the MVP voting behind 2 guys that put up pretty historic seasons. And Alvarez probably would have won if it were any other normal year. With 3 more years of original team control left and only being 25 years old, him continuing his 2022 production through 2025 is definitely a possibility, which will put this trade within striking distance of making the list. Last honorable mention, 2017. Pirates get O'Neal Cruz and Angel Herman from the Dodgers for Tony Watson. This one admittedly is a wild card and very speculative. We've hardly seen anything out of Cruz at the major league level, but what we did see shows us that there's potential for him to be elite. Stuff like him having the hardest hit ball in StatCast history, as well as having the fastest infield throw in StatCast history, both within the first month of him being in the majors, turned people's heads. And with the timing of his call-up, the Pirates still have 6 more full seasons of team control. If Cruz becomes the guy he's been hyped up to be so far, and stays healthy during those 6 years, and the Pirates don't eventually trade him, 3 big ifs, he could be a monster over the next half-decade. But enough with honorable mentions, now on to the main list, the 15 most lopsided trades since 1975 in terms of net B-WAR. Number 15, 1998, Mariners get Freddie Garcia, Carlos Guillen, and John Halama from the Astros for Randy Johnson. This trade is a prime example of what even a successful trade deadline rental can cost a team in the long run. Randy Johnson was one of the best trade line rentals in the history of the game. This Hall of Famer put up maybe his most elite 11-start stretch of his career, and Jolly Olive has a good video covering his performance. But the truth of the matter is that when you're buying a rental, sometimes you're giving up over 6 seasons of a potentially great player, or even multiple great players. Those 11 starts from Johnson cost the Astros 169 starts for multiple All-Star Freddie Garcia, 448 games from All-Star Carlos Guillen, and another 25 starts and 56 relief appearances from a solid spot starter and reliever John Halama. Unfortunately for the Astros, they made a pretty quick exit from the playoffs that year, including 2 playoff losses from Johnson where he was outdueled by Kevin Brown and Sterling Hitchcock. So the rental truly didn't pay off with the ring. And Freddie Garcia turned into a pretty good starter right away, finishing 2nd in the 1999 Rookie of the Year voting and 3rd in the 2001 Cy Young voting, while Guillen and Halama were solid, but not spectacular, in their years with the Mariners. But when you compare 2 months of even the best player in the league versus 16 years total of just solid MLB production, you're going to end up with a lopsided trade in the end. Number 14, 1997. Red Sox get Derek Lowe and Jason Varitek from the Mariners for Heathcliff Slocumb. The WAR values on this trade might even undersell its importance to the Red Sox. Varitek ended up spending his entire 15-year career with the Sox, which included 2 World Series wins, and was named the only team captain since Jim Rice in 1989. He also has the record for most no-hitters caught in a career, catching Hideo Nomo, Clay Buchholz, John Lester, and as it just so happens, Derek Lowe. Lowe also played a key role in the curse-breaking 2004 team, going 4-1 in the playoffs, including pitching 7 shutout innings in the series-clinching Game 4 of the World Series. Meanwhile, reliever Heathcliff Slocumb put up an ERA close to 5 in his year and a half with the Mariners. It was a bit of an adventure trying to find some highlights of him in a Mariners uniform. Okay. Heath Slocumb Mariners highlights. Heath Slocumb highlights. 5 minutes of Heath Slocumb highlights. Okay. Hopefully this is good quality. Let's see what we got. Oh, they got me. Number 13, 1993. Padres get Andy Ashby, Brad Ausmus, and Doug Botchler from the Rockies for Greg Harris and Bruce Hurst. Ashby was the big piece of this trade for the Padres, spending 6.5 years with the team and most of the time as the ace of the staff, including 2 All-Star appearances. His best season came in 1998, which, along with Kevin Brown, led the Padres to their second World Series appearance in franchise history. They also unloaded Hurst and Harris, 2 quality starters with the Padres, at the perfect time as they both went heavily on the decline and both retired within 3 years of the trade. Number 12, 1975. Yankees get Ken Brett, Doc Ellis, and Willie Randolph from the Pirates for Doc Medich. Brett, Ellis, and Medich all ended up having pretty short stints on their new teams, with Doc Ellis being the longest at only 1.5 seasons. But second baseman Willie Randolph became a staple for the late 70s and early 80s Yankees team that had 4 World Series appearances in 6 years, including back-to-back wins in 1977 and 1978. With the Yankees, he had 5 All-Star appearances, a Silver Slugger, and received MVP votes twice. Randolph looked expendable from the Pirates' point of view at the time of the trade because they had second baseman Rennie Stinnett, who had just had his best season before the trade, and looked to be the long-term solution for the Pirates at second. Unfortunately for both him and the Pirates, Stinnett broke his leg sliding into second in 1977, and while he was the league leader with a .336 batting average before the injury, he never fully recovered and hit .241 the rest of his career, and retired only 4 years later. Number 11, 2006. Devil Rays get Ben Zobrist and Mitch Talbot from the Astros for Aubrey Huff. This is another trade highlighted by a one-star player. While Talbot and Huff played very little with their new teams, Huff only playing 68 games with the Astros and Talbot throwing only 9.2 innings with the Rays, Zobrist became a key utility player for the Rays for 9 years. And when I say utility, I mean utility. He started at every defensive position except pitcher and catcher, and not just a token start here or there. With the Rays, he started 485 games at second, 238 in right, 143 at short, 29 in left, 24 in center, 17 as DH, 11 at first, and 2 at third. And third was only so low because Evan Longoria was holding down that position for most of those years. And Zobrist did all of this at a very high level, putting up 7.8 defensive WAR in that time. While the Rays made the World Series in 2008, Zobrist didn't get his first ring until he joined the Royals in 2015, and then got another with the Cubs in 2016. His 2009 season with the Rays was his best statistically, where he had a 149 OPS plus, played every position I mentioned earlier, and tallied up a total of 8.6 BWAR. Number 10, 2010. Royals get Lorenzo Cain, Alcides Escobar, Jake Odorizzi, and Jeremy Jeffress from the Brewers for Zack Greinke and Yuniesky Betancourt. Brewers fans' reactions to this trade, even retroactively, probably won't line up with what the numbers show here. In 2009, the Brewers had a great offense anchored by Prince Fielder and Ryan Braun, but their starting pitching was horrendous. Bringing in Greinke was one step in fixing that, along with signing Randy Wolf and Sean Markham and bringing back homegrown Giovanni Gallardo. And for the most part, it worked. The Brewers' 2011 team was tied for the winningest team in franchise history and came within 2 games of the World Series. Greinke is known as a fan favorite and a clear future Hall of Famer, but that doesn't tell the whole story of his time with the Brewers. If you look at Greinke in his prime from 2008 to 2015, the worst year and a half in that entire span was the year and a half with the Brewers, even though it was still pretty good. You could even make the argument that he was only the 4th best starter on that 2011 team, although the Brewers' first 4 starters all had surprisingly similar stats that year. Meanwhile, the Royals had the last laugh in this trade. Lorenzo Cain became a team leader for the surprising back-to-back World Series appearances in 2014 and 2015, culminating in a win in 2015. That year, Cain led the team with 7 WAR and elite defense. It's an absolute shock that he didn't win a Gold Glove in his time with the Royals, as among qualified center fielders from 2013 to 2017, he has almost double the defensive runs saved of the second highest, Carlos Gomez. And that's just talking about Cain. Alcides Escobar became an everyday starter at short for almost a decade for the Royals. While not a star, he started in over 155 games in all but 1 season for the Royals from 2011 to 2017, and provided some stability to the back end of their lineup. Number 9, 1991. Indians get Kenny Lofton and Dave Rode from the Astros for Willie Blair and Ed Taubensee. I gotta take this time to express my complete confusion that Kenny Lofton not only isn't in the Hall of Fame, but received only 3.2% of the vote his first year on the ballot and didn't get another chance. Lofton was absolutely a star, and his best years came after this trade to Cleveland. In just 5 years, he hit .316, had 325 stolen bases, and put up 31 WAR. To put those stolen bases in perspective, that's only 11 short of the current active leader D. Strange Gordon. And D did it in 11 seasons, not 5. Lofton also took second in Rookie of the Year voting, won 4 Gold Gloves, went to 3 All-Star games, and received MVP votes 3 times. How did he possibly fall off the ballot after 1 year? It makes no sense. Maybe it's because he played for 11 different teams. Maybe it's because he was traded 6 times. In my mind, Lofton is up there with Lou Whitaker, Dave Stieb, and Curt Flood as guys that need to get into the Hall really soon. Number 8, 1999. Twins get Johan Santana from the Marlins for Jared Camp. This trade was a rare one. 2 minor leaguers traded for each other where one was an A-ball while the other had just reached AAA. And 3 years later, one is competing for the Cy Young while the other is retired. If you look at Santana's minor league numbers at the time, that breakout was completely unexpected. Originally, the Astros had him in their minor league system, where he was struggling to put up an ERA under 5 and was left unprotected and selected by the Marlins in the Rule of 5 draft, and traded to the Twins on the same day, meaning the Twins would have to put Santana, who hadn't pitched above A-ball, on their active roster. And his early results as a 21-year-old in the majors weren't that impressive. ERA over 6, almost 6 walks per 9 innings pitched, and only 6.7 strikeouts per 9 innings pitched. In 2002, they sent him down to the minors to work with pitching coach Bobby Queller to learn how to throw a changeup. Queller made him throw at least 1 to every batter he faced, and sometimes even throwing over 20 in a row in a game. Well, it worked. When Santana went back to the majors that year, he was a different pitcher entirely. He went from being a guy that looked like he wasn't going to make it more than a couple years to being arguably the best pitcher in the league over a 6-year period from 2003 to 2008. He won the Cy Young in both 2004 and 2006 and still placed top 7 the other 4 years. He led the league in strikeouts 3 times. He had 3 ERA titles and led the league in WHIP for 4 consecutive seasons. And that entire time, the player he was traded for was out of baseball. Number 7, 2010. In a 3-team trade, the Indians get Corey Kluber from the Padres and send Jake Westbrook to the Cardinals. I'm going to look at this trade strictly from the Indians' point of view, as they were the team that made out like bandits in this 3-team trade at the expense of the Padres, who received Kyle Ludwig from the Cardinals. The numbers from Kluber are very similar to what we just looked at for Johan Santana. Struggled for the first couple of years, including some not incredibly impressive minor league numbers, and then went off with about a half-decade of dominance. 2 Cy Young wins, 5 top 9 finishes, an ERA title, 3 All-Star appearances, led the league in wins 2 times. Kluber from 2014 to 2018 was a beast, finishing only behind Clayton Kershaw and Max Scherzer in F4 in that time. And all of that lined up with 3 playoff appearances and 1 World Series appearance that went a full 7 games for Cleveland. Not only that, but Kluber saw a massive decline, including injuries, right at the end of his run with Cleveland. But not before they were able to trade him to the Tigers for Delino DeShields Jr. and Emmanuel Clase, the latter of which has been one of the league's best closers over the last 2 seasons, and the Guardians still have him under team control for another 4 years. Number 6, 2014. The Athletics get Marcus Semien, Chris Bassett, Josh Flegley, and Rangel Rivero from the White Sox for Jeff Samardzija and Michael Inoa. This is the only Billy Beane appearance on this list, but to his credit, it was a pretty good one. It probably would have been much better too if it weren't for a shortened 2020 season, which was right in the midst of Semien's breakout, sandwiched between 8.5 and 7.3 WAR seasons and top 3 MVP finishes. Chris Bassett also took a hit, missing almost 2 full seasons due to Tommy John surgery, had the shortened 2020 where he finished top 10 in the Cy Young voting, and never pitched over 160 innings in a season for the A's. It's not out of the question that without a shortened 2020 that those two put up another 5+ WAR on the A's side of things. But the fruits of this trade still showed in 2018 and 2019, where the A's had the highest team win total since their Moneyball season in 2002, with 97 wins each year. Number 5, 1997. The Phillies get Bobby Abreu from the Devil Rays for Kevin Stocker. This one I got a funny story for. So, I'm born and raised a Brewer fan, and in 2011 when Ryan Braun tested positive for steroids, I jokingly contacted some friends of mine that were Phillies fans and said, "This is an emergency, I need to figure out how to fit in as a Phillies fan as fast as possible." And their response was to tell me to be irrationally attached to past players, even if they weren't that great. My go-to line became, "I feel worse than that time the Phillies traded Kevin Stocker for that choke artist Bobby Abreu." Clearly tongue-in-cheek, but I lived on the East Coast when Abreu was with the Phillies, and specifically remember Phillies fans being really negative towards him. Doing a search on a few past articles, I can find that sentiment as well. While it's impossible to deny that Bob Abreu has put up some impressive statistics, any true baseball fan can tell you that these statistics do in fact lie. Abreu loves to pride himself on having a long streak of consecutive 2020 seasons, and if you watched him play with the Phillies, it was obvious that he, at times, was out there to get his statistics and just that. In an article that lists the 10 most hated players by Philly fans on Bleacher Report, Abreu comes in at number 10, with the explanation, Phillies fans like fiery competitors, and they often found Abreu's performance both on the field and in the clubhouse lacking passion and effort. Many felt he was more concerned with his own personal statistics than the team's overall performance. Maybe it's true that he only cared about statistics, but his statistics were really damn good with the Phillies. 7 20-plus home run, 20-plus stolen base seasons, with one being 30-30 and another being 30-40. He put up the coveted 300, 400, 500 batting slash line with the team as well, was a 2-time All-Star, and received MVP votes in 5 different seasons. Kevin Stocker, meanwhile, played 2.5 seasons with the Rays, putting up a meager 75 OPS+. Can't say I understand Phillies fans' distaste for Abreu, but the team being pretty good, constantly over 500 during his tenure, but never making the playoffs is probably where the frustration starts. Nothing is more frustrating or devastating to fans than a team that could make the playoffs, but just misses out, as my Brewer fandom taught me in 2022. Maybe I should have stayed a Phillies fan. Number 4, 1987, the Pirates get Andy Van Slyke, Mike LaValliere, and Mike Dunn from the Cardinals for Tony Pena. Cardinals got 3 years of a pretty mediocre Tony Pena, while the Pirates got 8 years, 3 All-Star appearances, and 5 Gold Gloves from outfielder Andy Van Slyke, 7 years of Gold Glove catcher Mike LaValliere, and a pretty solid rookie season from starting pitcher Mike Dunn, who finished second in Rookie of the Year voting. Van Slyke is the clear big pull of this trade. While not a Hall of Famer, he's solidly Hall of Very Good, and his very good years came exclusively with the Pirates. They also won their division 3 consecutive seasons, 1990, 1991, and 1992, which was the last time the Pirates managed to win their division. However, all 3 of those seasons ended with NLCS exits. LaValliere was also one of the best defensive catchers in the league during his run with the Pirates, accomplishing the rare feat of throwing out over 50% of attempted base stealers during his 7 years with the team. The end of Van Slyke and LaValliere's tenure with the teams began some very dark times for the Pirates, with 20 consecutive losing seasons from 1993 through 2012. Number 3, 1990, the Astros get Jeff Bagwell from the Red Sox for Larry Anderson. This one is a pretty famous one, and I'm willing to bet is what came to mind for a lot of you when you saw the title of the video. The 1990 Red Sox were in pole position in their division at the trade deadline and were looking to bolster their bullpen to round out their playoff run. To Larry Anderson's credit, he did just that, putting up a 1.23 ERA in 22 innings with Boston. But in his first playoff appearance that year, he blew a 1-0 lead in Game 1 of the ALCS against the A's, took the loss, and that set the scene for an Oakland sweep in 4 games. The other problem for Boston is the guy they gave up was a future Hall of Famer that spent his entire 15-year career with the Astros. And Jeff Bagwell's dominance started early, winning Rookie of the Year in 1991, winning unanimous MVP in 1994 with a ridiculous OPS of 1.201, going to 4 All-Star games, winning 3 Silver Sluggers, and even got a Gold Glove in 1994 with a D-WAR of -0.1. The 90s were weird. This trade is the poster child for how a trade deadline rental can change the future of 2 teams. There's a good chance the Red Sox break their curse before 2004 if they don't make this trade. I mean, imagine the 1999 Red Sox with Prime Nomar and Bagwell in the middle of their lineup and Pedro as the ace of the staff. That team would be scary. Number 2, 1989. The Indians get Sandy Alomar, Carlos Baerga, and Chris James from the Padres for Joe Carter. This is the 3rd appearance for Cleveland on this list, and spoiler, it isn't the last. This trade was an all-out disaster for the Padres. The Padres just missed the playoffs by 3 games in 1989 and were looking to add impact bat in Joe Carter. Problem is, Joe Carter put up by far the worst season in his career up to that point with a paltry 85 OPS+, but still received MVP votes. The 90s were weird, and the Padres finished well under 500. After that season, they shipped Carter to the Blue Jays, and he went right back to his all-star caliber ways and led Toronto to consecutive World Series wins and one of the most dramatic walk-off home runs in baseball history. For Cleveland, they immediately reaped the rewards of this trade with Sandy Alomar winning Rookie of the Year, having an All-Star appearance and a Gold Glove in 1990. He went on to play 10 more years with Cleveland, including 5 more All-Star appearances. Carlos Baerga also chipped in with 7 seasons with Cleveland, including 3 All-Star appearances and 2 Silver Sluggers. 1995 also saw the start of 5 consecutive division championships for the team, including 2 World Series appearances, and was one of the best times to be a Cleveland baseball fan as they set the record for most consecutive sellouts with 455. That destroys their longest sellout streak of 2022, which was 1. Number 1, 2002. The Indians get Grady Sizemore, Cliff Lee, Brandon Phillips, and Lee Stevens from the Expos for Bartolo Colon and Tim Drew. And now we have the 4th appearance of Cleveland on this list. In compiling every trade since 1975, they are in a league of their own when it comes to winning trades. They have a total of 316.9 net WAR in trades in that time, while the second highest team was the White Sox with 172.4, and third was the Rays with 93. Even though this was the number 1 trade, by a pretty significant margin, it could have been even better, up in the 50s for net WAR if they didn't ship Brandon Phillips to the Reds before he broke out as an all-star. But even without Phillips, this trade's amazing. While Grady Sizemore's prime was brief, only 4 seasons before injuries took their toll at the age of 27, those 4 seasons were great, making 3 All-Star games, winning 2 Gold Gloves, and getting a Silver Slugger at center field, as he hit over 20 home runs and stole over 20 bases in every season. He also received MVP votes in all 4 of those seasons and led the league with 134 runs in 2006. The trade is already looking pretty good, and that's not even considering what Cliff Lee did, winning the Cy Young in 2008, finishing 4th in 2005, and putting up 83 wins with only 48 losses in his 8 years with Cleveland. There's also some extenuating circumstances why this trade happened, as things were not looking good for the future of the Expos in Montreal. Expos GM Omar Minaya said of the trade, "The number 1 priority was not long-term. Long-term, we're going to be contracted. And if you were going to be contracted, the number 1 priority was to be as competitive as you can." They were surprisingly only 6 games out of the playoffs near the trade deadline, and Bartolo Colon, which to his credit did pitch very well in his year and a half with the Expos, was a last-ditch effort to make the playoffs and save the team. Well, it didn't work as they finished 2002 12.5 games out of the playoffs and were moved to Washington, D.C. prior to 2005.